Welcome to What CEOs Talk About. Do you wonder what CEOs talk about behind closed doors? How they bring their vision to reality? How do they overcome and succeed through adversity? We share that and so much more with each episode. Now, let's get started with the show.
Good day, everybody. My name is Martin Hunter. I am the host of What CEOs Talk About. Today, just before Christmas, I'm excited about the topic. Melanie, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Melanie, can you introduce yourself to the viewers and listeners?
Yeah, my name is Melanie Pump, and I've been in the corporate world for about 20 years until my current position now of CFO of Brane Inc. We're a cryptocurrency custodian. But what I'm here to talk about is more about the book that I've written that I released back in September, which is called Detox, Managing Insecurity in the Workplace. And it contains sort of my observations and research that I've done about the impact of when employees don't feel psychologically safe in their work environment.
So just to be brief and so that the listeners know, what is the title of the show for today?
The title of the show today is Impacts of Insecurity in the Workplace.
Fabulous. I'm excited to crack that open. So tell us about you. Where's your story? Where do you come from? How'd you grow into who you are today?
Yeah, and I'm happy to share that because it's pretty important in sort of how I learned about and really observed the insecurity. So I actually started out in the corporate environment when I was about 20 years old as a receptionist. And I came in, I'd had a bit of a rocky childhood, so I hadn't finished high school. And I came into an environmental engineering firm where everybody had a master's degree and a PhD. So of course I had significant insecurity and had that, the commonly used term imposter syndrome, even at the level that I was at. But I was so lucky to have landed completely, truly by luck at a company where I had an amazing leader who saw potential in me and knew that I could grow into something bigger. And she supported me to go to school. I went back and got my GED and then went on to do my bachelor and my accounting designation all through night school and grew my career. And while I was attending school, got promotions, actually 4 promotions within that first company, and then grew up to controller and director of finance into where I am today as CFO.
Wow, that is so. Tell us about the struggles, because a lot of people nowadays they get to go to school. I don't want to say free of charge, but there's usually somebody supporting them in their journey at school, right? It's very rare that you see what you and I did is tackle school from after the workplace. So what was your first thought when you went, you get excited? What was kind of like the first thoughts of actually going back to school?
Well, I mean, I was definitely excited. Again, I was nervous and insecure because I went and got my GED. So that meant I didn't have a full high school diploma. So I'm going to school as a mature student. So it was definitely quite scary. But my confidence built quickly because I took, marketing and organizational behavior, those kind of courses that I'm like, okay, I can do this. And then I just slowly chipped away at it and built my confidence over time.
It's funny how when you're younger, and not to say a kid, we push our children and the young people through school, but they don't really know what they want. And then all of a sudden you're mature and you go, oh, I know what I want. So therefore you're committed to that learning journey that you have, right? Mm-hmm. So what was the most difficult thing in that journey of, because I mean, first of all, congratulations. Like going from not going to school, because I quit school, I was 17, joined the military. So, and wow, from receptionist to CFO, like, hell yeah. Like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
Like that is a beautiful story that comes through hard work and dedication.
Yeah. And having really great people supporting me along the way. And that is the point that I like to make, because I believe that all of us have potential.
Mhm.
But so if I had stayed in that sort of insecure state that I was when I was 21, I may still be doing that same thing today. But because I had people who supported me and helped me kind of hit those milestones that built my confidence and kept me going.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say it was always easy, to even trying to figure out which direction I wanted to go.
Mhm.
I could have gone into human resources or accounting as I did. Those were difficult to make, but it's easier when you're already in the workplace, because like you were sort of indicating, I at least had an idea of what I wanted because I had already
Mhm.
had some experience. So that allowed me to move in the right direction.
CFO or HR? Talk about accounting or HR. Talk about two different kind of like Y junction at the V. Sorry, I should say. And like one is completely people based, and the other one is really number. Well, I
Right.
shouldn't
But
say that.
that really is what it was. Because when you come into the corporate world in the way that I did,
Yeah.
and I was working for an engineering firm, so I wasn't going to go and
Oh
become an
my.
engineer. So then it really was, what direction do you go? It's actually sort of interesting in a way, because the book that I've ended up writing now is actually much more in the HR direction. So as far as a CFO
Sure.
goes, I am quite people oriented. So it really was a bit of a decision point, because I do believe how important people are into the workplace and the role that HR plays in that. But I still chose to go the finance direction, with always a bit of an eye to people.
When we first met, that was the first thing that I saw. CFO, toxic work environment. I was like,
Exactly.
I'm interested
Yeah.
in seeing how those dots
Right.
connect, right? So
Yeah, which I
uh
think gives it some power, because we often hear many of the things that I talk about. You're hearing organizational psychologists, HR people
mhm.
saying that, but when it comes from somebody who is in a CFO role and understands the impact on the bottom line, of course, I want to promote this message because I want everybody to have a fulfilling job. But I also strongly believe that businesses don't reach their full potential when they don't create environments that employees feel safe in.
It is. So one thing that we advocate with my company, Urgio, is you say, people say good process bring good results. We add something to it, is good process and good behaviors bring good results. So what that what we took from years back in behavioral based safety, we applied to behavioral based leadership as well. So what are those behaviors that you can take a picture of that create this great active culture? I think the topic is very clear and distinct in today, with with the great resignation and how things are going along. I think your book is very timely
Mhm.
of analyzing, what is toxic, what is not toxic, what people
Yeah.
thought pre-pandemic, or you can't work from home. That's you're going to be lazy. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, please work from home, save money, right? Like, come
Yeah.
on, guys. Like,
Yeah, exactly. And it
so,
is interesting, because when we think of a toxic work environment, like one of the first things our minds go to is bullies and
mhm.
micromanagers, and like, that's the real sort of easy one. But there are other things that happen in a workplace that are not so obvious, that can be also creating toxicity. It's not just as simple as, if a boss is screaming and yelling, then therefore it's a toxic work environment. There are underlying things that also create toxicity.
Oh, absolutely. So how did you come up with the idea of writing the book? So you're in the accounting world, and I'm super curious of finding out what was there a trigger, or was it kind of a journey to the point where I was like, okay, because I'll tell you after how people have pushed me to write a book, and this is how the podcast became. But
Mhm.
how what's that click mode for you to say, oh, I'm going to write a book about this?
Well, it's definitely been a journey. Like, it's been a couple years, or maybe probably more than that, a few years, where I would be having conversations with friends, and it would come up about, oh, well, that person's just insecure, or their leader's
Mhm.
insecure, or the impacts that having. And I started seeing it a lot. And it's not just in the workplace. I mean, in
Mhm.
relationships as well, insecurity is a challenge. But I just really seen it over time. And then when the pandemic came about, similar to you starting this podcast, I was quite a social person before. going out to concerts and these kinds of things. So all of a sudden I had quite a bit of time on my hands. And so I started writing, and I didn't necessarily expect that I would write a whole book, but it just kept on going. And I found it really rewarding, and started doing research on the topic, and just decided to keep going with it, to have it be something good that came from the pandemic.
What a beautiful journey that is. That is absolutely gorgeous. That is amazing. So
Yeah.
tell us about the book. So what's the premise? What was how did you come up with the topic? First of all, I think would be something of value for the listeners.
Yeah. So first, as I mentioned, I have really observed over time how often we explain that somebody's not performing because they're insecure, et cetera. But very rarely do we actually ask why somebody is insecure. So that was the first thing. I really wanted to just kind of start this dialogue, because some people may be insecure because of things that have happened in their personal life or earlier, but there is also factors in the workplace that are influencing that. So just that sense is really what it is. And also the fact that I have had really healthy work environments where I've seen the impact that has on me and my ability to perform and the people around me. And then contrasting that against the unhealthy work environments, having had that comparison is also what just made me really want to tell that story, because I so clearly saw the difference between those two types of workplaces.
So tell us, for the listeners, most of the people are CEOs, entrepreneurs that are listening, and they're like, "Oh, I can't wait. What's in it for me? A shiny thing. What can I take away from this conversation?"
Yeah.
What is a super underestimated toxic behavior or situation that is really under the radar, under everybody's nose, that you caught as, I'll call you as a subject matter expert in this case?
Yeah. Oh, one of the factors that can happen even in a workplace that may otherwise seem healthy is when there's really low transparency, and this tends to happen a lot in entrepreneurial environments, because things are changing so quickly, and often even strategies are changing quickly, and the team is reacting and changing, and it's happening even more actually in the remote environments where we are now, where information is not getting shared and people aren't clear on what's happening, and it creates a lot of uncertainty. And uncertainty creates insecurity. If people don't know what's happening, that's when they start to go into a protective position, because they don't know if they're performing up to expectations. They don't know if the company's doing well. They don't know if they're being kept out of things on purpose. So it's really what I've observed over time, that over communicating and ensuring that you're being transparent. And, as a leader, especially as a CEO, you might think that you're communicating what's happening because it's really, really clear in your own mind, but it's very likely that people around you are not as clear as you are, or haven't put it together as clearly as you have. So, a really high level thing that leaders can do is just make sure they're really clear on why they're doing what they're doing, and what the long-term plans are, and how each person in the company is contributing to that. And that right there will really increase the level of security that people feel in the workplace.
There's a practice that I do, and I call it the weekly sit rep situation report. My military background, at the end of every week, people know at around lunchtime, they look for an email from me. I know email is slow and different. It's almost like snail mail with Slack and all that good stuff. But I really want people to take the time to do it. I don't do it in Slack. I do it in an email format purposefully. I think if I could send snail mail to everybody, I would, but then it wouldn't be as impactful. But I tell the people what I've done, what the big relationships have been going, my meeting with the partners as well. How's it going? Here's what I'm thinking. And so I'm assuming from what you're saying, that's a good thing for us to do.
Absolutely. I really do believe that, because, and even more so in this disconnected world that we're in today, because there's not the opportunity to sort of run into somebody in the hall and have a discussion. So people are missing parts of the story of their business. And there's a lot more likely that departments can become siloed. So, you don't ever want to, I was going to say, you don't want to be forcing communication, but in some ways in this environment, you have to be really intentional to make sure that your employees are feeling engaged and like they're part of the team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the critical activities or one of the acronyms that I always tell people to, or leaders to do, is direction, support, and open lines of communication, right? Always provide the direction. Cause I think I agree with you. There's nothing worse than going, what are we doing? How's it going? Like, is that, and then, like you said, people become very safety conscious. Like, what's in it for me? Like, what's that? I think that's a critical point. And I think going too fast too, right? I think that quality over quantity is something that a lot of entrepreneurs, and that's what I don't like sometimes about social media. They'll go, entrepreneurs, it's all in the action. It's all in go, 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 go. If you fail, keep failing faster. And you're like, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it can get quite confusing for people, and especially in entrepreneurial environments, because you're always throwing out different ideas, and maybe you'll do this, maybe you'll do that, and it's hard for people to know which direction they need to follow, because they're maybe not clear on what was just an idea versus what is actually a direction that the business is going in. So just ensuring, and so I love what you're doing there, is at the end of the week sort of summarizing what's happening, because I mean, I know from my experience in startups, over a week there could be 4 different directions that get proposed. So it is good at the end of the week to be okay, level set. This is where we were. This is where we're at. This is what we've decided to move forward with. Because that way you don't have people, it can happen that people continue down paths and put work into a path that actually isn't even the direction that the business wants to go, but somebody's maybe forgotten to tell them or communicate that to them. So definitely communication, always is transparency is really important to create an environment where people feel like they belong and that their jobs are safe.
2 very popular words that when put together, you've missed the mark in regards to direction is when you hear, fuck. That combination of 2 words, you go, I missed something. Somebody did something, went down this path, and they go, shit, I just lost a whole bunch of time, lost a whole bunch of work.
And that doesn't feel good to anybody. Because I mean, all of us want to contribute, and we want to be working towards something that's moving the business forward. So yeah, when you feel like you just spent hours on something and realize it doesn't even matter, that's pretty tough.
And that is one of the reasons why I do my Friday sit rep, is because there's a few times where people went down the road and I came back and I go, shit, that is not what I was assuming, and or the direction that I had provided was not clear enough on where I was doing, and people went sideways, and people would come back and say, I'm so sorry. Oh, no, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. You did what you thought was best. There's nobody in the world that comes to work with, I should say nobody in the world, very few people in the world.
Very few.
That come in ill intent and saying, well, let me work an extra 18 hours over the weekend to do something that is going to get caught on Monday. That's not the right direction. So it's very rare.
And that is, one of the messages I do portray in the book is exactly what you say. Most people come to work wanting to do a good job. And in my experiences, when we use unproductive behaviors that actually work against that, it's honestly usually because we're insecure. And so things like procrastination and avoidance, or people not collaborating or not sharing information, often they're doing that as a bit of a protective instinct. So if we create a work environment where people feel like they're safe and they are part of the team, you're going to see a reduction in some of those behaviors that we often categorize people as lazy when they're using. Really, they may be doing it because they just don't feel safe.
True. Very true. I always say, always go into communication or into a meeting thinking that you're wrong. I think analyzing, our job is to facilitate as leaders, right? You facilitate, delegate, facilitate, elevate, and celebrate. And I think to be able to elevate somebody, you have to clearly understand what's in it for them, right?
Exactly. And understand why they may be using a behavior. Like procrastination is one that I really think that we need to look closely at if we have an employee who's doing that, to try and understand why that might be. In my experience, people tend to procrastinate about things that they're nervous about doing. They don't feel like they have enough training. They don't feel like they're up to it. So they just find reasons for it to keep dropping down to the bottom of their list.
I'm putting my hand up gently.
Yeah, of course we all do. And this is sort of how I came across that, was noticing myself doing that, and then noticing people on my team doing it. And when I did see people on my team procrastinating a lot, putting some effort into creating safety around that, whatever that task was, and all of a sudden they were more open to doing it. Because our brains, the subconscious is so powerful, and it'll protect us. So if it thinks that some task is dangerous and is going to make us feel bad about ourselves or any of these things, it's going to find reasons for us to not do it. It's amazing the power that our subconscious has.
I hail to that, sister. I think that the safety, our job as leaders is to create safety, right? When you go, and I always refer back to the term chief, right? We say chief officer, chief, and I find it funny when I have young entrepreneurs that have like 3 people and they call themselves. So I'm the CEO, I'm the COO, and I'm the CFO. You're the chief of what? Your shorts, little big man. Like you're not the chief of nothing. Chief means that you are representing a tribe, right? So if you think of back in the day, the male biological, hey, you're there to protect the herd and defend against, all these threats. Now these threats are no longer physical. They're more kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not theoretical risks, but they're financial risks that are not necessarily, they're a detriment to your health, but not as in aggression, right? It is. Right. If I don't make enough money, then I can't buy a house. If I don't have a house, then I can't feed my kids, whatever. Right. We still need to provide. And that threat of being able to provide is what, as leaders, like you said, create that environment of safety. Right?
Of safety, yeah. I mean, I talk about it. I don't know if you're familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Yeah, so like Maslow's, the base level is that food, water, air, and shelter, and then you move up to the next level, which is safety, and you go up to esteem, and our needs change. So many of us now, certainly in North America, have that base level need looked after. So then, as leaders, we're helping people fulfill those higher level needs, and the second one is safety, which I include psychological safety in that. Part of what we are, what our instincts are, is to protect ourselves physically, but also to protect ourselves psychologically. And so as leaders, we need to think about that. It's not just, is the workplace safe? People aren't going to hurt themselves physically, but are we protecting them psychologically as well? Because they will perform better if they're not worried about, watching their back because someone's going to come and shame them or call them out publicly for something.
Well, let's take what COVID has done to mental health. You've got all the food you want, you've got all the shelter you want, you're completely safe, but yet mental health is gone through the roof in regards to situation. I personally lived it. A young lady that I coached, that is my daughter's teammate for field hockey, coached her since she was 6 years old, committed suicide at the age of 13.
Oh, wow.
And you want to talk about safety. This child was loved. This child was by her parents, by her neighbors, by her family, by her sister, by us, her team. And she made that choice. So no matter how we thought we had created a safe environment around her, she thought that the best solution for the entire world and for herself was to take her life. Like, wow, that's I miss summer very, very much. You'll hear a crackle in my voice because it's still fresh. But anyways,
it's tragic.
If we can, through this podcast and through the conversation that we have, address that mental health issue, that for me is a big thing.
Well, and because it does come back to that, and when we're spending so much of our time in a workplace, it does have a significant impact on our mental health and our levels of depression and anxiety. And exactly, like through the pandemic, it's become an even bigger problem it was before. And if you have a job where you don't feel safe and there's a lot of uncertainty and you don't feel like you're reaching expectations, that's just going to layer on to any mental health issues that you might have.
Yeah. So what's what's another toxic environment or toxic behavior that kind of flies under the radar?
That flies under the radar. I mean, a really critical piece is making sure that people are in the right roles. Um,
Oh, yeah.
because if people aren't, well, there's a couple different angles from that, because of course if you're not in a role that you feel that you can fulfill, you're
Mhm,
going to feel insecure
mhm,
right away. But then if you have a leader above you, if people are like leaders are feeling insecure in their role as well, that can filter down throughout the company,
mhm.
because their behaviors are going to be protective. They aren't going to be transparent because they're going to feel like they need to protect themselves and their position. So you really want to ensure that you put people in the role that they have the ability to meet the needs of, or if they don't, that you provide them with the support that they need to be able to fulfill the needs of those roles. And part of that is it goes both ways, because when we're going for jobs, we also need to be really clear about what our abilities are,
Mhm,
so that the person who's hiring us knows, and therefore they can support us. I think,
mhm.
so we've kind of created a bit of a fake it till you make it culture. And but that's not helpful, because then if we're going into a company and we're going to fake it, then it's a lot more likely that we are going to become insecure because we're actually hiding our weaknesses. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah,
And faking it brings on internal stress, right? Am I doing the right thing?
of
I
course.
mean, every time you lie, uh, I mean, we've our boy is going to be 10 years old this year, and we still got an elf on the shelf. And every time I play with the elf, I was like, I feel like I'm lying to my boy,
Yeah,
right? And it's like, yeah, but it's a good lie. Like it's about
it's a good
Santa. So
one.
is it
Yeah,
a
yeah.
good lie? But then I like, oh, when he is going to find out that you lied to me all those years, Dad.
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I did, man.
Right. Yeah, I know. I know. It's funny. It's hard, but in the workplace, I mean, we do want to be said as transparent as possible. And when the other thing is that if you are pretending you're something, or you're not being totally authentic about who you are, people pick up on that.
Oh yeah.
So, right. So that is going to make it a lot harder to build authentic relationships. And when people feel like you're not being 100% authentic about who you are, they may not totally know what it is. And that actually creates insecurity in a relationship, because they don't know what you're being real about and what you're not. So I am a huge proponent of being who you are, talking about I mean, weaknesses seems to be a bad word these days. We're
Yeah.
not supposed to talk about weaknesses, but we all have them. And
Areas for improvement. Areas for
areas for
improvement.
improvement. Yeah. Yeah. Or competency gaps is one of the other ones that gets used a lot. But actually the job that I have right now, when I, was talking to them about the position, I went through the job description and I
Yeah.
said, okay, I can do this. I can do this. I'm maybe 50% on that. I've never done that before. So that they knew what I brought to the
Yeah.
table, what I didn't. And that way I don't feel insecure, because I can, when something comes up, I can go, as we talked about, I've never done that before. I'm happy to do it. But I would like to have some support in that. And it's worked out great. I don't feel insecure, and everything gets done better because I get support where I need it.
It 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 is so critical, because when I mean, all of our clients, when we start their process with them, regardless of what stage of maturity we bring them on, we always look at their hiring process. Do you hiring and performance management in regards to ask attitude, skill, knowledge, experience, and
Yeah.
capacity and capability as well, but that's the back end. But anyways, attitude is first. All right. Attitude. I mean, you don't hire somebody to be, I don't know, you don't hire somebody to be a logger or a lumberjack if you're looking for a lumberjack position. There is some basic skills that need to be filled. And
Yeah.
but what's happening is often at times people hire backwards. They'll go, what's your experience? What's your skill? And then what's your attitude?
Right.
In backwards. So it's better to say, well, hold on a second. We're hiring Melanie. Melanie said she can do all of this. Okay, well, she was truthful. Well, would you not want to have a CFO, somebody who is completely truthful on
Mhm.
what that person is capable and not capable of doing?
Yeah.
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 Number two, skill. Okay, great. She doesn't have some of the skills. Can we teach her the skills? The experience will come through, there's a certain level of experience that you want to have. But hey, is this really critical for her to be successful in the first 90 days? No, it's
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, and it's not it. And then it forces that discussion. I talk about both the skills gap and the miss and the cultural misfit as well, or poor fit, because it's a skills gap, because I have also had it happen before, where I've gone into jobs and job interviews, and you have an amazing connection in the interview and you can just talk forever and it's awesome, and they end up hiring this person, but they actually just kind of got a bit drunk on the chemistry of working together, and they didn't realize that this person actually was too senior or too junior, and although the attitude was right, as you're saying, you do still need to make sure there is a level of skills match that it can work, because otherwise it can create insecurity as well. But I do totally agree. Like, you need to value both of these things. It has to be a fit from a skills perspective and from a cultural or attitude perspective.
What is too much information? So let me put context around my question.
Yeah.
When I was in the Army and we went for missions, we only knew about our mission. And the reason for that was to create safety for ourselves.
Right.
You don't know what you don't know. And if you don't know, you can't lie about it, because if you know about it and you get caught, then you'll lie and then they'll break you in and you'll have to tell the truth, because you always get broken.
Yeah.
So in the office, what do you think? What's your opinion on just enough information? Do you agree to it? Do you not agree to it? If you agree to it, what do you suggest? And if you don't agree to it, then why don't you?
Yeah, so I do support over communication. Just enough information, I think, can create insecurity, because I think often, and of course it depends on your business. If you have a number of people who are just doing jobs where it is you're coming into the office, you're putting in time, and you're leaving, they're much more basic process oriented jobs, it may be less of a factor. But if you're working in an organization where people are involved in the strategy and contributing to the overall business, at a more thought strategic level, they're going to notice if they don't have all the information, and they may not know exactly, again, what it is. But I think we need to give people credit. People pick up on signs or signals that things, maybe, for example, if the company isn't doing very well, people will notice that customers are leaving, or that the number of customers that are coming on is dropping. So I really do believe in communicating as much as possible, because if people start to feel they're not getting all the information, that's when they start to get scared and consider whether they should leave the business. So unless there's a privacy issue, competitive advantage issue, I believe in communicating as much as is reasonable.
For me, you're absolutely right. For me, is I apply what I learned in the military. Is, will I create safety or create risk by sharing this information? Right? Is this going to create more uncertainty or create an area of safety? Because I think that sometimes information has to be, as the author, you have to think of the audience when you're writing. It's not about you, it's about what do they want to know, what do they need to know, and what's important for their safety in regards to what you're writing. Because we did this and we did this, and you use some big language for somebody who's more of a transactional, they're just going to not feel great about, because they don't know what you're talking about. I think
this is absolutely. So you do need to assess what the environment is. But actually, somebody gave me a quote. I don't know where it came from the other day, but about how bad news is better than no news.
Yes.
And yes. And I think that's true. If things are not going well in a company, if a leadership team is silent on it, it's going to cause more trouble than if they just give that news. And like, people are more observant than I think often leadership teams give them credit for. So we do need to be thoughtful. If there's signs and indications of things that are happening in the business, we need to communicate them.
People forget that bad news. So when you think of critical human needs, especially for, all of us need. So do you hear me? Do you see me? Do I matter? Right?
Yes.
In even bad times, during COVID, I've had people, like, companies came to us to help them out through, hard times, and say, have you spoken to your team? Well, no. Well, we need to make a decision first. No, include them in the decision, because you see them, you hear them, and they matter. So one of the companies really took it to heart and said, hey, listen, okay, Mark, can you help us? Okay, great. So as the managing partner, I helped the director, and we sat down and I said, okay, we're down 50% gross revenue in the next 30 days. What do we do? And people said, I'm ready to work 3 days a week. I want to keep my job, and I'm ready to take a pay cut and work 3 days a week.
Yeah.
And then the other person said, shit, that's a great idea.
And I think that's, especially if it is a healthy environment and it's somewhere that people want to continue working, if leaders are transparent with them, then they can work together to try to figure out how to fix the problem. And then in the end, that's actually better for the leader as well, because they're not left lying, awake at night, worrying about this problem completely on their own. It's actually shared, and the whole team can figure out how to approach it.
It's funny because they cut cost. Everybody was very well balanced. I mean, nobody was traveling anywhere anyways. So people came back and they said, the founder and owner said, wow, I really get to spend time with my new baby and my wife now. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah. So there you go. He's like, I like this. I took a pay cut, but man, oh man, I'm happy. I was like, there you go. Right. Yeah. And then the opposite happened as well, where the industry, our company went skyrocket, and we took the same approach. So, okay, hey, I don't think we'll be able to service everybody. We're going to have to tell people no. How do we, somebody said, well, we have to say no to some people. Well, who do we say no to? How about we say no to the people who have the most amount of money and the problems that are not necessarily of massive impact with the organization? Because a lot of people who had money came to us and said, hey, can you fix this? With only a certain amount of time, there's like, okay, do you help the people that really, really need the help? And so we grew in volume because we were helping the little person, or not the little person, but the smaller businesses, right? I got a question for you in regards to the term politics. So you hear in the workplace, oh man, there's politics in there. So I'm sure that's in your repertoire of answers. So when somebody says politics, what comes to your mind, and how do you talk about it, address it?
Yeah. I mean, politics, there can definitely be politics in work environments. And I do find more so an environment that is toxicity, because people feel like they're trying to play a game because it's unclear what so for example, if you're going for a promotion, there's not a clear, transparent way to do so. Therefore, you feel like you need to play politics in order to position yourself. But unfortunately, what ends up happening in an environment where there is not clear paths to success is people tend to start withholding information from one another, and creating cliques as like a form of self-protection, really. So that you end up creating an environment where there is a lot of office politics, but really it does often come from lack of clarity, and then people's need to band together to make their way successfully in the company. And that really damages an overall sense of belonging within an organization, because you have these sort of factions within silos. I mean, this politically motivated type organizations do have a lot of silos, because people are, again, protecting their territory and not communicating with one another.
That is so true, that people find refuge. I can't, power in numbers. Oh, Melanie is a CFO. Her and I, like, we get along great. Maybe if I get, rub elbows with Melanie, and then I can be well seen. Oh, that is so true, right? That is so true.
It happens. And it is really unfortunate, because then, there could be really, really great people within the organization that aren't getting the opportunities that they deserve, because they're not lucky enough to get aligned with the right people, rather than there being an organization that has, it comes back to, there's a lot of talk about inclusion, and that is really it's in all different parts. It's not just about gender, et cetera. It's anybody can feel excluded in an environment where there is a lot of politics, and they don't know how to play it, and because of that, they end up getting sort of pushed out of important meetings or places where they could really get seen.
So what do you tell a CEO or CFO or COO, some C-suite
Mhm.
executive who comes into a business and starts noticing this kind of, ooh, this smells toxic,
Mhm.
smells funny. What's kind of the 1, 2, 3 step that you have for
Yeah.
C-suite executives that come in that toxic environment?
Well, for one, recognizing that we do have the power as the top leaders in the organization to make a difference. Tone from the top is a real thing.
Mhm.
If we start setting the tone and modeling the kind of behaviors that we want to see throughout the organization, it will start to spread because people will see the behavior of the leader and realize that that is actually what's accepted within the organization. It goes the same way. If a leader is toxic and a bully, that's making it okay for others in the
Mhm.
community that way. So for as executives, we really need to monitor our own behavior and make sure that we are, not flying off the handle and not raising our voice at people, and that we're also really inclusive. So when you walk through the office as a leader, greet people, say hello. Don't just always talk to the same people. Make sure you're
Mhm.
you're interacting more broadly, and also starting to seek the opinions of different people within the organization and helping people to feel valued.
It's when I was working in Africa, we had I had a young gentleman that worked with me, younger gentleman, and he had 4 wives. And I was like, oh my goodness, how do you manage 4 wives? And I think he had 23 kids. And this
Wow.
he was 35 years old, anyways. And I said, there's preferences. He says, I tell each of my wife, I can't here's $5. You're my favorite. Here's $5. You're my favorite. And so he would tell all of them. And he said, if there ever was a dispute before the 4 of them, he'd say, who's my favorite? They'd all put their hands up. And I say, okay, who did I give $5 to? They all put their hands up. You see, hey, you are all equal in love to me. And so I thought that that was absolutely magical in regards to how to treat individuals to say, hey, how can I have an independent relationship with you, but yet let it, if ever that toxicity, because I
Yeah.
mean, you can't always control what people, I mean, you can create an environment as much as you can, but if
Mhm.
somebody says, hey, I want a promotion, I need more money, da, 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 whatever the story is, people might try to undo that great
Yeah.
culture by
Yeah.
not necessarily inadvertently, but they'll try to position themselves. But if
Right.
you're intentional about how you treat, and I love what you're saying, treat everybody in a just manner.
Mm.
um Not the same, you don't treat people the same, you just treat them this
Yeah.
in the same respect and dignity, I think is
Yeah.
key. So
And
that.
realizing the power that we have as leaders as well. I
Mhm.
one of the companies I used to work for, one of our values, which has always stuck with me, was every interaction matters. And it's
Mm.
so simple, but it really is true. And even more so as leaders, when we interact with people, we can influence their day. If we say something that makes someone feel bad, they can feel insecure and unhappy for the rest of the day. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't give feedback, but we should be messaging things in a way where if we're giving somebody feedback, it's okay. Well, how can we support them to grow
Mhm.
rather than just being negative, and just being thoughtful about how we're impacting others.
Yeah, that's our third core value. So our first core value for us is get shit done. Uh,
Mm.
that for us, but we don't want to undo that. Where their second value is servant leadership, like be a servant, and the third one is really well grounded. And I think that that is for us something that as a leader or as any employee within our company, you have to be well grounded in how you interact, meaning you're thoughtful. We didn't want to use the word parenting because when you become a parent, there's different, you view things a bit differently. Um, so, I mean, it doesn't mean that because you're a parent, you're a good parent, far from it. But that well grounding component that you are responsible for others and in
Yeah, I
ensuring
like
that,
that.
and that for us is a key thing that we live by, but also encourage within our clients. Um, so one thing that always comes to mind is, okay, I've got a top performer and I've got a shithead. I got somebody who's just always, I can't fire him or her just because they always seem to do what's, kind of, how do I deal with that, one rotten apple, and how do I deal with that, I'll say, teacher's pet, top performer that wants to use his skill set to position himself or herself?
Well, I mean, the low performer, or the rotten apple, so to speak, like it's we really do have to be thoughtful about those individuals, and of course give them every opportunity to improve within the organization. And often they are that way because they're not in the right role. So either they're not happy in the role that they're in, they don't have the skill set to complete the tasks. Something isn't right, because I do. I mean, as we've already talked about, nobody really goes to work every day and wants to do a bad job, right? So, as leaders, first we need to figure out, okay, so what is it of those things? Is this person not in the right role? Do they not have the support? And work through all of that. But we really need to do that as quickly as we can, because having that one person is impacting everybody else on your team. And that is, as I have had, many of these situations over time, I've realized you can't just focus on the person that's the problem. You have to focus on how that is impacting the rest of the team. Because you could have, so your high performer there could actually be really unhappy coming to work every day because they're dealing with somebody who is poisoning the environment. So it really is on us as leaders to figure that out. First, figure out if it is the role, and if there's something else, a different role the person can be moved into, or if there is support that we can give them to improve. But failing those things, we have to be willing to exit the individual from the company, because it can really be working against the productivity of the rest of the team. And then you risk losing those high performers if you don't deal with it.
And even sometimes the high performers are the assholes, right?
Well, and that's even harder, right? Like and that's hard, but I've yet to see a situation where someone is such a high performer that it is worth the toxicity they're creating in the work environment. Yeah. And it's so hard. And I've seen these things take way too long to resolve, because everybody's like, oh, but they contribute so much. But it's hard because the negativity that they're creating is tends to be less visible than the contribution that they're making. But those underlying issues, they're probably making everybody else less productive.
I break it down to numbers all the time. I say, okay, so if people are coming to your office so let's say your top performer is your sales guy or sales girl, and they're bringing in $100,000 a month, and you're saying, okay, so out of a team of 10, you've got one top performer, and you have 9 people who are each taking an hour of your time during that month. So calculate their salary, your salary times 9, and deduct that from the $100,000. Oh, you're like, oh shit. Well, that's now $50,000. Okay. Right. How many times that in the addition of that time, how many times do you have to fix that mess? Oh, here's another $10,000. So really, is your top performer really that critical that is worth $40,000? And you're going, now you've got a different.
And rarely, I would say that's rarely the case. And then when you add in, the likely productivity increase of other people, if the workplace is positive and healthy, and then you could find someone else as well who would be who would perform at that level.
10 times out of 10, when they pull the trigger, they go, oh, that's the best thing I've ever done in my life.
Exactly. I've never seen it happen. It happened differently every time. And then you bring somebody else in and you just realize the whole shift of the tone in the environment is worth it. Even if maybe you do lose a little bit of money or productivity from that one person. The benefits are great. I agree. We tend to take too long to make those kind of decisions.
I always kind of put a rowing analogy to that. So if your top performer rows faster than anybody else, your ship is still going to go in circles.
Right. Yeah. Yes. That's a great one. Yeah.
You're just going to keep going in circles. Let's talk about you for a sec. What are you the most proud of in your book? You've written a book now, first book, I'm assuming?
Yes.
What are you most proud of in the book itself? Like, oh, not necessarily of writing the book, because I'm sure that writing the book is a great success and that's great. But in the book itself, or in the process of writing the book, what's the thing that is you're the most proud of?
Well, I am proud of coming back to me personally a bit, but my ability to be transparent and to have gotten to a place in a career where I was comfortable, really truly being authentic about the experiences that I've had, and about my journey, and telling people that, because since I have done so, I've had so many people that have come to me and told me about their own journeys, and so many of us have had challenges over time, and we feel shame about those challenges. But me coming out and saying, I didn't finish high school, I got into drugs when I was a kid, I've been bullied in the workplace, admitting those things, even though I am at a CFO in a female leadership role, doing something that many people would aspire to. But me being comfortable saying those things it's helped me, because it's actually given me confidence to realize that I can say what I would have thought before were shameful things, and actually it's benefited me more than anything. And then also the fact that I've been able to help others by doing so. So I'm definitely feel proud about that.
It's impressive how bringing those dark things in the light just kills them, right?
It absolutely, yes. Yes.
I met a woman who, I mean, our kids go to school together, and she lived in Africa. We're talking about Africa, and she got raped in Africa.
Oh, wow.
And she talked about it so freely, because she says, I do not want it to root. I do
Right.
not want it to poison. I want it to stay out and out of me completely.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was like, wow, how courageous is that?
Yeah.
And when you think about her keeping it, she says, I didn't rape anybody. I got raped.
Right.
It's not like I was the assailant and I'm hiding this deep, dark
She
secret that
feel
I've
any
got.
shame for it. Absolutely. And I totally agree. And I think the more of us that can be authentic about our journey, it allows others to be, and people to feel safer in the workplace being themselves. And when we are ourselves, then we're also, more productive in the workplace, because we're not spending time kind of hiding who we are. When we hide who we are, it takes a lot of energy. And so I know for myself, it's really made a big difference. And it was an unexpected thing to sort of feel how freeing it was to put my journey out there, and to help people through doing so.
Courage is contagious. That
Yeah.
is when one person leads, and
Yeah.
everybody goes, oh, well, if that person is doing it, well, I can do it too.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's so okay. So then, what area for improvement? What's the other one? Gap in performance or competency gap?
Competency gap.
If you were to, when you're writing your second book,
Yeah.
what is it from the first book that you said, I did not do this so well, I could have improved on that?
Yeah. So I think actually probably putting more of myself into the book,
Okay.
because I did. So I've gotten much of myself in there, but I think, as I read through it now, there are still some parts of it that I could be more personal, and it would make it better. Because it's not an easy thing to completely open yourself up. So I did it in many ways, but I think in the next book, I will focus more on sort of how I learned these things, and what my own personal experiences was. 'Cause I think it would make it even more relatable and readable to people. Whereas in this one, I did use a lot of stories and other people's experiences, and I think in the next book I would be a bit more personal than even what I have been.
Okay. What is the reference material of choice that you keep going back to? It could be a movie, it could be a book. What's the one thing that you keep pulling out as a leader, as an author? What do you refer back to consistently in your life?
Well, there's a couple of books that I refer to, and I quote quite. One of them is Ray Dalio's Principles,
Hmm.
because he talks a lot about radical transparency
Hmm.
and authenticity, which is so interesting. And it's a giant book, and I quote it a number of times in my book. So I really do respect. I mean, obviously, hugely successful person,
Hmm.
but his philosophies also I find really interesting and align with mine. Somebody else who I refer refer back to all the time is Adam Grant, who's an organizational psychologist at Wharton. And interestingly, same kind of thing, all the ideas and thoughts that I've had about the workplace align completely with what he comes out with. But he's come at it from a completely different angle than me. He's done it completely research-based, not, hasn't really been in the corporate environment that much, certainly had a different journey than mine, but coming at it from these two different directions, really see things the same way. So I find it really interesting, as some validation, because he's done a lot of research on it to the ideas that I have. So those are two people who I refer back to and whose books I refer back to quite a bit.
Oh, good. What's your call to action? So of course I'm going to say, go out there, get your book. What do you want to change the world? Like, what's your call to action for the person who reads this? You go, here's the one thing that I want you to do from now on.
I really want us to be more thoughtful about why our employees may be acting in the way that they are, rather than us categorizing somebody as being, lazy or antisocial or avoidant of hard work, et cetera. Really thinking about it. So when we see an employee acting in any of those ways, ask why and see if there's something in the environment that may be contributing to that. Because I think we're eliminating people too often. And therefore not creating opportunities. If when I was 21 years old and started that job as a receptionist, if, I was a bit rough around the edges, if the leader in that company just go, oh, that's just somebody who's destined just to be a receptionist and didn't give me an opportunity and didn't talk to me to understand a bit why I might be shy and not comfortable in that environment, I may never have grown to where I am now. So I just want, even when people seem a little different as well, I'd like us to be giving them opportunities and trying to learn about them.
There is value in truly listening when you say, hey, how you doing? And I think that simple question that we tend to overlook again and again and again and again is if there's one thing that is important in today's culture, is really, with all the noise, with all the activity, with everything that's going on, is if you can close your mind and open to, like my Scottish grandfather used to say, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. You should listen twice as much as you speak. And then back then you get a slap by the head too as well. But I think that if you truly and honestly do that, there's human beings want to teach, want to pass on what they know, and they want to help. That's just biologically, that's how we're wired. So if you're going to help somebody, then truly and honestly listen.
Yeah. And I totally agree. And it is difficult. Like, I recognize how we all have a lot of demands put on us, and there are so many distractions, as you said today. So it does take some effort to stop and don't just be always reacting, like actually stop and think about why somebody, may be performing the way they are, and just put a little bit of thought into it and try to pause, which is very hard. The business, especially startup entrepreneurial environments, move so quickly, but I think businesses will benefit.
You can be quick and compassionate. You can be fast and kind. One does not stop you from being the other. Absolutely. There's no way, shape, or form, just because you want to go fast, that you should be disrespectful, that you should be what's the word I'm looking for? Not obstructive, but capping somebody or putting them in the box for a certain reason. Just with a little bit more compassion, the world would be such a better place.
And then you also are creating loyalty. Like that's the other thing that maybe we're not valuing as much nowadays as we should. So like that first company that I worked at, I was there for 7 years because they supported my growth and I had 3-4 promotions while I was there. And then I went on to the next company that actually somebody who I'd worked with there recruited me. And I was at that company for 6 years because they created, again, more opportunities for me to grow, supported me to do my schooling. So there really is a lot of value in that as well. When we support people and help them grow, it does create loyalty. And that can be really beneficial to a business.
The economical impact of keeping staff, of not having to go through the hiring process, about the corporate knowledge that you keep, your ability to problem solve within a finite area. People don't understand the value of being kind and helping people elevate. Like, it's easy. Delegate the job, facilitate the work, elevate the individual, and celebrate their wins. And people will say, I want to work for Martin for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
That is so true. I could talk for hours on this. You and I share a lot of views and values on this. Melanie, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was wonderful. So your book, we can get it anywhere and everywhere, I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely available. Easiest place to get it is on Amazon, or you can go through my website, which is melaниepump.com. Or check me out on LinkedIn.
Can you give us a sneak peek? What do you think the next book will be?
Well, it's going to seem like it's not totally aligning, to be honest, because I'm actually thinking about my next book being on grief, which seems like a strange topic, but I think that it's something we don't think about enough these days. Yet that we're so off. People are grieving jobs, grieving relationships, and it really impacts your mental health. So it's something I've been looking at and interested in. So I seem to start on these sort of taboo topics. Insecurity is one we don't talk about. Grief is another one that we really don't talk about.
Well, if you want a candidate, you've got my daughter Ariel, who's a 13-year-old girl who went through and found peace through physical activity, through rugby, through training. She's 13 years old and she wakes up at 5:20 in the morning to come to the gym with me. So she doesn't want to lose her fitness to keep on her rugby career and field hockey. I mean, that timing about the grief, that's where she finds refuge. And that's just it. That will be after your next book, or halfway through writing that first book. Then we can talk about it, and maybe that talking about will give you different subjects and different chapters to write.
Yes, definitely. It's a huge topic. So
thank you very much, Melanie. I truly appreciate you being on the show. It was delightful.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
With that said, my name is Martin Hunter. I'm the host of What CEOs Talk About, where we translate strategy into frontline operation. It is almost Christmas time. Can't wait to take a break. All right. Thank you very much, folks.
Thanks for tuning in to What CEOs Talk About. Make sure to click subscribe to get notified about future episodes, or check us out at www.whatceostalkabout.com.